What's up, y'all? Y'all know what it is. All right. Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope you're well. A lot of brothers sent me this one. A lot. And I appreciate that. Straightened up. I appreciate it. These are draining. Necessary, but draining. Because you see this a lot. It's happening a lot more. It's getting in the news a lot more, but it's never been a new thing. It's always been happening. There's just been no vocabulary or no space in the large scale mainstream for the vulnerability of black men. But there's an interesting type of vulnerability that black male athletes experience. To be larger, don't be hulking. To be a larger black male at that, there's even less space for appreciating the nature of certain types of vulnerability. So today we're going to start with this case going on with Dwayne Haskins, right? NFL player, quarterback, the Steelers, who recently got into a situation where, let me get this here. All right. Got into a situation not long ago with his new wife, right? This is a report, and there's plenty of these. You can find them all over, but I'm looking at one on AOL.com, right? Came out today, and entitled Dwayne Haskins' wife charged with domestic violence for reportedly punching Steelers quarterback. Now, in this particular article, unlike some of the others I've read, Haskins has somehow come out and denied the allegations on social media, and he made a statement saying that he's okay and has all his teeth, and told people not to believe what they read. The reason this all came about is apparently the wife in question, Calabria Gondrazek Haskins, was charged with domestic violence for allegedly assaulting him over a conflict about where they were going to go that evening. And then another report read that he and his friends actually left for a club and did not wait on his wife and her friends. This is, I've read this on another, not this particular article, but on another one. Either way, it says that she's charged with battery and domestic violence resulting in bodily harm. She reportedly punched him in the mouth after a disagreement. Some articles said he lost a tooth. This article says that a piece of his tooth was reportedly found on the floor of their room at the Cosmopolitan, where the incident allegedly occurred on July 3rd. Haskins, 24, reportedly suffered injuries substantial in nature, is what it read. And he not only had a missing tooth or a cracked tooth, I'm not sure which it is actually yet. He also had a split upper lip, right? And apparently, it's argued that they were there for a wedding, but it turns out they got married in March, and after dating for a year and a half. And then it's said that they were there to renew their vows. Now, I'm not sure if they were there for a wedding or to renew their vows. I will say, if you just got married in March, not exactly understanding what it is you're there to renew. But that's a conversation for another video, I guess. Either way, this young lady was apparently taken into custody, right? For apparently assaulting him. Now, the vulnerability I was talking about earlier for larger men or black male athletes for that matter, is that even if he defended himself, right? Anything that left so much as a mark on her would be viewed as him initiating violence. So I want to say he was actually very smart. In terms of how he handled it. You don't necessarily have to take a blow to the face and have a chipped tooth, but you understand your vulnerabilities as a black male. I would argue that he understood it extremely well, and he understood how not to let what could be a 30-second encounter end his entire career. Very intelligent, at least as far as that. Because they just got married, there may still be time for an annulment, but it's yet to be clear what's going to go on. And since he denied the allegations, I'm not exactly sure where he's going with this. But that particular type of vulnerability, being an athlete or a larger black male, is a simple one. because you are not perceived as having any vulnerabilities, the slightest response, even in self-defense on physical terms, can actually mean the end of your reputation or career. Right? Now, apparently, from what we understand, there's nothing that he extended to her physically that warranted her attacking him. Nothing. This is an NFL player. If he wanted to hurt her, he could have. Yet I'm not hearing a whole lot of critique coming from feminist groups in particular about women who initiate violence. And we know, I'll get to that in a minute. This is particularly important too when you're talking about football players and boxers, because a lot of the kind of issues we see going along with them are actually consistent, although we probably won't find this out until after they're dead. And that's if they're tested for it, but consistent with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, right? Repeated blows to the head, the impact on the brain, and the increase in violence, the increase in quick temperament, all of that. And yet what we find is this brother intelligently dodging a situation that could have cost him his career. All because, supposedly, where they were supposed to go that night. I tell you, the expectations for CompuSerfdom, they don't diminish with money. Really don't. But let's get to the crux of it, right? We're talking about the Black community. One of the things I pointed out when I responded to this on Facebook, one of the things I said is it's easy to be tough when the man you're punching isn't trying to lose his career and go to jail by hitting you back, even if only in self-defense. Regardless, too many think I'm exaggerating and making these stories up. The problem is that the abuse is often connected to a low burning contempt for Black men. And obviously, I'm talking about in the Black community. That I argue is kind of baked in multi-generationally into our Black gender dynamic. Anti-Black misandry, then, doesn't need to present to such extreme degrees to have impact, as it, among other things, makes us numb to male vulnerability. This is why some women will puff their chests and high-five each other over her supposed strength, while others laugh at him for calling the police. As for me, I say he was smart. Even defending himself could land him in jail. If she calls the police first and intimates that he abused her, it's a wrap. No matter how many men endure this, we're told to shut up because #believe all women. Right? And this is too much of what we have to deal with. It's sad. And I hope this brother gets over it, but I do want to clarify in the Black community that abuse, and this is something you can actually look at in Dr. Tommy Curry's The Man Not. He's the first that I've seen really reveal this information to the public. And that is that abuse in the Black community is bidirectional. In terms of extending from men and extending from women on relatively equal terms, violence is fairly equal in our community. Yet in this instance, despite the possibility of CTE for such athletes, not necessarily Haskins himself, but he didn't have a response. You don't have a record of him initiating violence in the past either. It's interesting. If you look at, let me see, hold on. I want to make sure. There we go. So if you look at the works of people like Jennifer Langhenrichsen Rowling and her work from 2012, Rates of Bidirectional versus Unidirectional Intimate Partner Violence, one of the things she talks about are the ways in which violence tend to work in relationships as a whole, right? And in all relationships, what she points out is that 84% of all relationships are nonviolent. And of the 16% that are violent, right, 58% of that 16 is bidirectional, even. And this is across race. 42% is unidirectional, meaning one group extends violence to another. And out of that 42, right, 14% of that is perpetrated by men. 28% is perpetrated by women. So part of what we're looking at here is a practice where there's a relatively small population of relationships that are engaged in violence, and for that matter, but a good portion of that is actually initiated by women to a greater degree than by men. And yet men, and black men for that matter, are the face of it. I think the reason why is because men tend to be the ones that respond more with their hands. Women tend to use weapons more often, but because men are relatively stronger, they do more visible damage. Although there are other indices that point out that psychological damage is about equal for men and women. So this means that, especially when you're talking about arguments and various types of abuse that don't present physically, there's a lot that goes on under the water, as they say, that incites a lot of rage by the time you get to a stage of violence. And when women even initiate violence more, it doesn't present on men to the same degree. That said, despite all of those statistics in regard to, intimate partner violence across race, bidirectional violence, intraracially speaking, despite all of that, Haskins did not, from all indications, put hands on her. I wonder how many people are going to come out and actually criticize her behavior. It's actually rather quiet on that front. But it's interesting to see nonetheless, and sad. But various types of abuses like this are not as uncommon as I wish they were. Right? And it's actually quite, especially in social media, this kind of abuse is pretty well accepted. Right? Like y'all can check this one out. Right? Tell me what you think of this.
What the fuck is you doing? You crazy? What the fuck is you doing? Why you playing with me, bro? Why you playing with me for? Why you violating? You see what I'm talking about? You see what I'm talking about? You see what I'm talking about? I'm gonna fucking shit. She's talking. Stop what? I'm gonna fuck that bitch up. Who is that? Who is that? Who is that? Here. Give me like that. Now get out the box.
All right. So what were we looking at? Apparently this gentleman had another woman in the car, and what looks to be either his girl or his ex and her friend tried to light him on fire. Poured gasoline all over the car, got in his face. And men have learned in the last few decades that if we respond physically, we go to jail. Women have learned no such checks because they don't consistently go to jail for that, for one. And they know, actually having been raised a couple of generations into it, that by and large, most men with something to lose aren't going to put hands on them. So there's really a one-way acceptable form of violence in our community that allows women carte blanche behavior for the most part. And it's getting exhausting. It really is. But I would argue, brothers have to become more litigious. Really. Brothers do. We gotta start taking people to court, women included. It is what it is. You have no other recourse. She's going to keep doing it as long as there's no pushback, and you can't put hands on her, even in self-defense. You're left with few other options other than to do nothing. Start taking people to court. And in this case, in terms of Haskins, I hope he's able to get an annulment. What I can say in terms of how black men have been socialized, especially in regard to relationships and family. And I learned this when I was a nationalist as a high school kid, as a matter of fact. You're just supposed to sit and take it. What did Ayanna Van Zandt say? You're supposed to sit in it with her. And that's it. If you respond to her with violence, of course, that's an atrocity that needs to be ended right away. If she responds to you, you're just supposed to sit and take it and keep taking it in the name of blackness. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But yet and still, this is where we are. Now, the other person in the news you all are more than familiar with is Mr. Richard Sherman, an NFL player, right? And Mr. Sherman's been through some stuff, right? And we're not real clear entirely, or at least I'm not, on what all is going on here, right? Apparently, in a TMZ article that came out yesterday, was a 911 call where apparently his wife called the police because he was threatening to kill himself. And at one point, he was threatening to kill himself using cops if need be. She said he was willing to attack the police in what was presented as a form of suicide by cop. Apparently he had 2 bottles of alcohol, hard alcohol. And like I said, it was suicidal. according to the call. Now, I don't really follow athletes a great deal. I've only seen a couple of articles for each person. Well, I actually saw more for Haskins than I have for Sherman, but I'm sure there's more to come out. I'm not sure what's going on. I've only seen Sherman for the most part, as a bright, intelligent cat, who's very outspoken on a number of things. I've never known him to be suicidal, but again, I don't really follow him, so you guys have to tell me. But after one bottle of vodka and one bottle of Hennessy, it's said in other reports he crashed the car, walked home, and had an altercation with family members trying to get in the house. Meanwhile, his wife was calling the police because she was saying he was suicidal on one end, and she wanted the cops to come stop him from hurting himself without shooting him. And that's apparently the report we got. Now, this is sad, and I hope the brother gets some help. I'm not sure what else is going on in his life that brought this about, but I did find an interesting article useful in looking at his situation. It's one you can find on WashingtonPost.com. It says, for Black men, higher education and incomes don't lower risks of depression, researchers say. This is a piece you can find by Sherman Asari and Dr. Tommy Curry, right? And it basically reads that more education and higher incomes are associated with lower risk of depression and discrimination for white people and Black men. Excuse me, white people and Black women, right? White people and Black women. They are more associated with lower risks of depression and discrimination as they achieve educationally and secure higher incomes. But for high achieving Black men, more success actually increases the likelihood they will experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. That's the conclusion that Asari and Curry reach. Researchers who spent decades studying depression in and discrimination against Black men in the U.S. In an article in The Conversation, they discussed the results of 6 studies that show an inverse effect between Black men's achievement and adverse mental health outcomes. More education and higher incomes are associated with a lower risk of depression and discrimination for white people and Black women. But for high achieving men, as I pointed out, it's a very different story. Let's see. Oh, it doubled up. Okay. One long-term study followed 681 Black youths over 18 years. For Black male participants, an increase in perceived racial discrimination between ages 20 and 23 was correlated with increased anxiety and depression symptoms as they grew older. Another, which compared Black men with Black women, white men, and white women over the course of 25 years, found that men with higher educational credentials also experienced more depressive symptoms. According to our studies, regardless of their economic success and personal ambitions, Black males are still perceived as more threatening and dangerous than their female counterparts. Race alone may not be the issue here. Instead, it's an issue of race and gender that may stem from hopelessness, inequality, and blocked opportunities. Now, what does that have to do with Sherman? Clearly, he's not a victim of blocked opportunities, but at the same time, it's interesting to note that Sherman is a member of Phi Beta Sigma and graduated from Stanford University in 2010 with an undergraduate degree in communications. He began working toward his master's degree when he returned for a 5th year during his final year of eligibility. So, fairly educated, intelligent brother who was clearly successful may not have escaped the results of this test. And as I said, there's still more that needs to come out about what Sherman is actually dealing with. But alcoholism, suicidal attempts all suggest there's a lot happening. But I draw a link to these two brothers, as many others have. I think Coach Greg Adams did a video. I think Brother Dennis Sperling is doing a video, and I'm sure many others will, that are connecting what these high-profile brothers are dealing with. Whether it be abuse, whether it be, having the police called because of what they're dealing with. These issues speak to underlying issues under the table, underlying situations that these men are grappling with. One shape, or form, they're all dealing with it. And as far as I'm concerned, I hope these brothers are able to get some help for the most part, and be able to secure some type of stability for whatever demons they're grappling with. I can say, as far as Haskins is concerned, a brother in his position, there's very little we've read about that warrants what we saw. Very little. As I said, I wish him well. And I wouldn't wish this stuff on my worst enemy for the most part. This is horrible. So if you guys have any additional information, anything I've missed, please make sure you share it in the comment section. There's news coming out, every moment. It's hard to keep up with it all. But I just wanted to kind of take a moment to give you guys some stats, give you some information so you can kind of use these situations as a measure for what the data is actually saying in certain circumstances about Black men and the vulnerability they face, right? And what kinds of issues come with the difficulties that they grapple with, right? So y'all take it easy. I hope you guys are well. Peace.